Thank you very much, Gil. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you, Barbara, for having made this opportunity for us. After this fantastic introduction by Gil, I have nothing more to say, and I thank you. Goodbye. Let us begin by saying something about palaces, because we're about to speak something about palaces. The Near Eastern palace, as well as palaces in the Aegean, we're about to speak about palaces in the 2nd millennium BC, is a building used for the residence of the royal household, the seat of the government, and the center of economic enterprise. And we see here the Mari Palace, circa 1750, northern Syria, then a mighty kingdom of its own, which has archives, storerooms, house of the king, that is slaves, women slaves, and then you have various residential areas in the 2nd floor, as well as a throne room in the lower floor. Cypriot Broodbank, in his book about making the Middle Sea, have said that basically all the palaces were similar in not only the ancient Near East, but also in the Mediterranean, saying that palaces, it's not very optimistic, were extractive institutions that mobilized wealth from taxes, estate, sharecropping, compulsory labor, trade, or other means in the interest of those near the top of the hierarchy. That is, its economy of coercion. It is an economy which is supported by literate administration, by workshops, by monumental architecture, and by storage or redistribution. All of these are shown by examples from the famous Minoan Palace of Knossos, also in the 2nd millennium BC, but in Crete. Let's ask now a question already asked by Tolstoy in the opening of Anna Karenina, which said, all the happy families are, of course, uninteresting because all the happy families are absolutely identical. However, all the unhappy families, they are interesting for novels, right? Because each and every one of them is unhappy in its own way. Let us ask, therefore, if Canaanite palaces or palaces in the Mediterranean are the happy families or the unhappy families. Good news, they are the unhappy families, but I have now to spend some time in order to demonstrate it. Cuneiform in the Middle Bronze Age, Canaan, circa 1950 to 1550 BCE. That's interesting. Nobody was writing so much in Canaan during that time. No administrative use also of the alphabet, so freshly invented, circa 2000 BC. Basically, there's only one site in Israel, in the northeast, which has cuneiform, which is Hatzor. How many tablets, would you ask? Nothing like the tens of thousands excavated in other sites by famous archaeologists of the Oriental Institute. Total number of tablets from the Middle Bronze Age in Israel, including Hatzor. Somebody has a guess? A good guess will be 10. Okay, these guys were not big on writing. How did they manage, therefore, to have, after 120 years of scientific excavations, how did they manage, therefore, to have an urban and palatial civilization? Furthermore, everybody who has knowledge in the imagery of Mesopotamia and Syria knows that Syrian images of rulership are very common. Therefore, you see some from Ebla, from Alalach, the famous head of Yarimlim, Katna, seated ruler, Ebla, basalt basin showing the king and the queen in banquet. However, when you're moving to the west and you see Crete or Minoan Crete, there's a big problem in which you don't find the image of the ruler. This is a problem which Ellen Davis called the problem of the missing ruler. I would argue, and indeed it's possible to demonstrate, that the Canaanites are not so keen about their rulers in monumental art. And indeed, like the Minoans, they do not show their rulers. Let us zoom now into the northern part of Israel, into the area north of Haifa, north of Akko. You can see the Haifa Bay, Akko Plain, and Kabri, 5 kilometers from the sea, and located in what Horden and Bessel would call a Mediterranean microregion, because it is bordered from the west by the sea, from the east by the massif of Mount Meron, very high, separating Kabri from the mighty kingdom of Hatzor. We'll talk about this later. From the south, probably in a border between Akko, a polity to the south, and Kabri. So you can see it is a pocket polity. It's a place which has boundaries that are both geographic and political. Excavations, it's cut, but I'll say what's written. Excavation at the site began at 1986 to 1993 by my late teacher Aaron Kempinski and by his co-director Wolf Dietrich Niemeyer, then from Tübingen University to 93. And then in 2003, just before 2005, with a research budget of something like $50, we renewed the excavation. What did we do with $50? We bought gas for the car and some falafel in order to bring geophysical team to go and do prospection in the area that we thought that the palace continues. The palace did continue, and with this we managed to later to attract more funds in order to show that the project is feasible. After, of course, many people have said, oh no, the palace is done, everybody finished excavating it, which was, of course, was an utter folly. Eric Cline from George Washington University has been co-director with me for the last 11 years, and I hope we will continue this collaboration many, many more years. The palace. The palace resides within an avocado plantation which is cut by a British Mandate period road. So it makes things rather difficult. The avocado plantation, not so much, because the kibbutz will remove trees if we'll ask them to, which is very civilized of them. However, the palace, you can see that our excavations are basically showing that the palace is growing with time. This is DW6, we'll go over it. The earliest level, which is fort-like small structure, then it becomes a palace, then it becomes a larger palace, until at the last phase of DW or DS3, just remember phase 3, it's been destroyed or abandoned. And I don't think this is the entire size of the palace, but it's going in all directions because we never managed to find a closing wall, which is annoying and terrifying at the same time. What if we have 6,000 square meters of palace? We'll never dig it in our lifetime. Doesn't matter, more for our children and grandchildren. Brief history of the palace. In phase 7, which is something during the very beginning of the Middle Bronze Age, something like, or middle part of the Middle Bronze Age, there are domestic structures below the palace's external walls, meaning that there were houses before the palace have been. These houses have been built on top by the earliest palace. Please notice this really nice handle in the shape of a duck. Can you see the beak and the eye and head? It's really, really nice. And it belonged to somebody that his house was later taken by this, let's say, proto-palace. You can see how thick the walls are. So this is a corridor with 2 entrances. This may be a window. And in Baal Samet, our ceramicist is standing in this corridor. And it's basically showing that the earliest palace is actually a fortified structure. Immediately later, they make a big party or some kind of a termination ritual in which they put all the pottery from the previous phase into this corridor and ending it and making it all in order to build on top of this fort. Something which is much more palatial because you have large halls already in which people may gather. We are already in phase 5, and this is the transition between MB1 and MB2 to those who are interested. What made it possible for the palace to be built at the same time is the fact that the entire site is being fortified for the first time. So you don't need a fortified fort at the time, you just need a palace. Still, the walls of the palace are rather wide, and this thing that is much more than 2 meters in width, this is an internal wall of the palace. So probably it was much more than 1 story high at the very beginning, which is interesting. And now we're getting to the interesting story, which happens, it's always interesting, but this happens in phase 4, which is in MB2, circa 1650 BC. Why is it important 1650? I'll tell you soon, because it's something to do with the volcano eruption in Santorini. The palace has been enlarged, and then this is the central part of the palace. I mean, it's only like the central rooms. And then somebody is building this very nice hall, which is called Hall 611, with paved floor paved with plaster, but then it's been painted, but in a technique which is called fresco. That is, you paint on a wet plaster. According to common wisdom, this is not a Near Eastern technique, but rather a Minoan one. And this checkered design, which has also lilies and other flowers, actually have parlors in Minoan palaces, including face doors. That was already been established by previous excavators, Niemeyer and Kempinski. So this is one Minoan-style wall paintings. Now, this is a really interesting room because it had 4 entrances, so it may have been a focal point of the palace, a place in which banquets have taken place. Another deposition of frescoes was here in one of its entrances, in secondary deposition, and this was most likely a miniature fresco, that is, in which it's really broken because it was used as a filling material in the entrance. But it shows a landscape and it shows some architecture, perhaps some people. These are just few of the more than 2,000 fragments that have been found and still not reconstructed. But they have very good parallels. India Cortiri in Santorini, West House miniature frescoes, and the same type of rendering of the sea, some boats, some cut rocks, some marshland, and some architecture. And of course, the technique is technique of fresco rather than secco. That was a really big thing in the archaeological world of the beginning of the 90s, because it was the first time in which that type of frescoes have been found in the East. Afterwards, it was also established that Leonard Woolley had already beforehand have found such frescoes in Alalach. Afterwards, frescoes were also found first in Tel el-Daba in the eastern delta, and then in Katna in Syria, but these are later. Why is this important? It is important because it's the first time in which Western art is found in the East. That is, usually you assumed, like Leonard Woolley have assumed, that Eastern art is influenced by Minoan wall paintings. But this is rather the opposite, or at least in this case. Was this the only instance in which you have Minoan or Aegean wall paintings in Kabri? Of course not. And in 2009, we began to excavate rather far away on the other side of the road, excavating the floor of a large structure, and we actually found there, in secondary context, actually patching the floor, these fragments that this is not enhanced. These are the original colors in blue and in white. And if you try to be a bit imaginative, which I hope you will be, otherwise I'll have a hard time persuading you, that this may look like a wing of a creature. And this may look like a foot, but it's really hard to know. The problem is, it's not the original find spot of the place, because the people in the Middle Bronze Age have actually used it, not this side, they used the white back side of these frescoes in order to patch their floors. The technique is again Aegean, the date is again the 17th century, and again you have some features such as borders that are marked with knife, really bright blue color that are typical of Aegean and are totally not typical of ancient Near Eastern ones. Just for example, please see these flying fishes from Philakope in the island of Melos. Can you see the dark green border below that is almost identical to our border top right? And of course you can see plenty of white and blue also in these geese and a dove, I think, on top from Akrotiri. We managed to do this thing in which we mounted this. It's a bit of cheating, but it's always convincing. To mount these pieces on top of a griffin from the Mycenae Cult Center, just as to suggest how it may have looked. Even without accepting that it is a griffin or another animal, the find of a fourth, or rather a third and possibly fourth Aegean wall painting in the Palace of Kabri is already something which is extraordinary, because it's basically saying that somebody have actually commissioned somebody with Aegean knowledge to come and to do several different wall paintings. One of them is the floor, the other one is miniature fresco, and the last one is almost life-size animals. These are three very different in style, similar in technique, and all have parallels in the Aegean. Why would they choose Aegean art rather than using ancient Near Eastern art? Just to recap the fact that Chatzor is just on the other side of the mountain. Why wouldn't they do that? Just for the chronology, I know that some of you are interested in chronology. I'll do it very, very short. As everybody are aware, the big fight in the archaeology of the Bronze Age in the Mediterranean is when the eruption of the Santorini volcano happened. Did it happen in the late 17th century or in the early 16th century? The answer to this question is actually important both to Egyptology and also to the chronology of the ancient Near East. A very large, as you know, very large project of chronology called CM 2000, led by Professor Manfred Bitak, have actually shown that the problem is much worse than people think, because all carbon-14 dates are pointing to an early date for the eruption in the 17th century. All Egyptological-based dates are actually pointing to the 16th century. So there's a real problem. We did a set of samples from Kabri for the relevant phase, which is phase 4, and most of them actually center, which is really, really annoying for everybody supporting a low chronology, in the 17th century. There was also another radiocarbon article very, very recently shows similar dates. What is it saying? It's saying that the wall paintings from Kabri, which have good parallels in Santorini, also have the same date as Santorini in the 17th century BC. If you are living well with this chronology, then it's not a problem. If you would like an Egyptological-based chronology, then it is a problem. You know, of course, the problem may be solved in three scenarios. One of them is saying that radiocarbon is flawed. The other one is much more extreme. We're saying that something is flawed in Egyptian chronology, but because this is heresy and I don't want to be burnt at the stake immediately as I leave, so this is impossible. And the third, which is the most terrible of all, is basically saying that both radiocarbon and Egyptology are somewhat flawed, and then we have a problem. I did not invent this problem, I'm just showing the dates. I just had a meeting with Professor Bitak in Vienna 2 weeks ago. He again told me that I'm utterly mistaken. I do not understand Egyptology, and which is, of course, he's right. And there's all the chances that the lower chronology may work, and that something is flawed with radiocarbon. But this is a problem which is consisting. Sometime immediately afterwards, probably, these wall paintings are going out of fashion. They've been scraped out of the walls and been buried in various parts of the palace. And then the palace is being enlarged. This is the last phase of the palace. This is phase 3. And what do you have from this palace? Basically, you have the main court. Then you have another courtyard here. Then you have another courtyard here. Then you have something that may be royal apartments on the second floor, because there's a destruction. A lot of things are falling down. But our discoveries that are showing what the Kabri Palace is all about actually come from 2 new structures that we have excavated in last years. One is called the autostat structure, soon I'll explain why. And the other one is a series of storerooms that actually contained really interesting commodities. These actually gave us the key to understanding what happened in the palace and why the Canaanite palaces were the unhappy families. Another thing that we excavated from this phase is this large structure. This is on the other side of the road. One room, perhaps a temple, perhaps we'll see in one of the next seasons. The problem with all these temples, one-room temples, that usually they're found utterly empty. All the goodies are in the courtyard of the temple, currently under the avocado trees. Autostat structures. Autostats, these paving blocks made of coastal sandstones, are covering all the walls of this structure, which is stuck to the external wall of the ceremonial wing of the palace. This is ceremonial wing, hall 611. This is the autostat structure. And you can see it has 2 rooms, a back room, and a main room with heavy collapse of plaster from the last phase of the palace. It's a really special room because the autostats, you can see that they have dowel holes in them. They actually, on top of them, probably carried another level of wooden beams. So it was really nice. It has a white plaster floor, then panels made of stones, then it has wooden beams on it. What happened in these areas? According to the find, the archaeological find, they ate a lot of sheep. And actually the good parts of the sheep. And actually the good front part of the sheep, because it's much more prestigious to eat the front of the sheep than the back of the sheep. And that's amazing what zooarchaeology can tell you. Front left side was preferred there. So people were eating the front left side of sheep there. Back room had several large storage jars. Afterwards we discovered what was there. So elite banqueting in this small, rather small, but very, very festive room. Okay, so we knew that this is the main ceremonial wing of the palace. This is the autostat structure, and we said, okay, if this is the autostat structure, this must be the closing wall of the palace. What shall we find? If we'll find the closing wall of the palace, we will find the western courtyard of the palace, and it will have all these great deposits of trash, and all the zooarchaeologists and the people that do residue analysis would be utterly happy, and that's going to be it. We excavated it in the year 2013, and we began to find one storage jar and then two storage jars, and we said, oh, how lovely, we're going to have storage jars in the courtyard. 2 days later, we found these storage jars. The moment that the count began to be above 12, we have decided we're actually inside the room, right? We're not the brightest ones. And then, I know, when you persuade yourself that you're in a courtyard, it takes you time to understand that it's not. But then we did the right thing, which is stopping excavation in all other areas, putting everybody to work in this room for 2 shifts, because we understood we'd have something that was never found in palaces in Israel before, which is a storeroom full of jars, which is something extremely unusual. So we decided we're going to dig it, and we're going to do residue analysis, organic residue analysis, not for one storage jar or 2. We're going to do for every single storage jar, which was, of course, very brave of us, because we discovered that we have something like, and here you see how people are working. Everybody have their own pet storage jar. They're working 2 shifts. Everybody, of course, loved us by the end of the dig. And so the end result was rather attractive. This should be glued here. 40 storage jars, each of them something like 1 meter tall, capacity of 110 liters each, resting in this rather small room which has 2 entrances, and we managed to sample the bottom of each and every one of them. That was really nice. Then we had to pack them all and send them to the lab in Haifa. The director, or the head of the Institute of Archaeology, will never forgive me for filling the storerooms with broken storage jars. No, I mean, she forgave me since. Good. The problem is that we found another entrance here that led to another storeroom when we didn't do it in 2013. We cleaned that, and then we found a drain. See how nice this drain is? And I know this is the way. If you ask, this is the new methodological way. It's called the Winnie the Pooh position in order to excavate drains. And of course, you need something that will collect all the liquid when it's broken. We also sampled this drain, which is made from a storage jar. What a nice plaster floor, right? You see it's wobbly here. There's a reason why it's wobbly. Okay, we numbered each and one of them that I've said before. We photographed them. Professor Andrew Koh of Brandeis University, who does organic chemistry, have sampled them all. Then have taken it to Brandeis, then put it in the mass spectrometer, and lo and behold, it takes us less time for him, that we have tartaric acid, which is red or white wine, and then you have syringic acid, which is red wine, and then you have cinnamic acid. That it's really interesting because it's from something which is called storax. Storax is a resin of a tree that grows in southwest Anatolia, and you make incense from it. So it gives some nice fragments. And then you have cineol that appears in many different plants, etc. And a methylsyringate gives you honey, and it's important. And then you have 2 compounds that gives you terebinth resin. This is another key. And then you have cedrol, which is only typical of cedar oil. To recap, what do we have inside? We have red wine, which is flavored with numerous things, including cedar oil, honey, probably to make it sweet, terebinth resin to make it technically a retsina. So what you have is red sweet retsina, which seems like a combination between a cough syrup and a nice wine. Isn't it interesting? And just for those who like the myrtle taste, this myrtle aftertaste, they added myrtle. It's a combination of imported as well as local species because cedar had to be imported as well as liquid amber. All the other ones can be obtained locally. Composite wine, is it something unique? Absolutely not. In the wine archive of Mari, you can see that wine or different type of elite wine was transported together with different types of oils or essences of cypress of myrtle and juniper, basically saying that this type of composite wine existed. There are also evidence from Egypt in the ancient Near East during the same time. So the rulers of Kabri actually had a huge stock of wine, which was the most fashionable wine of that time. Right? There was a mixologist. Wine was mixed before serving. Wine was not mixed beforehand. Wine was mixed immediately before serving. This is a letter, one for the king of Mari, who is in a campaign. The palace as well. My lord wrote me about blending wine and having it carrying to one town. I opened the wine house and blended 4 containers of red wine as my lord likes to drink it. Okay? Ev Zimrilim likes his wine mixed in a specific way. Okay? Hopefully I blended this well. Okay. Do we have evidence for blending it in Kabri or for blending it just before use? The answer was given to us in the 2015 season, in which we said, okay, we're going to dig just one more room of storage jars. We dug one more room. We found an entrance to another room. I said, okay, let's just dig a sample of the third room. And Eric was, of course, obliging and said, okay, just a sample. We dug a sample. We found an entrance to a fourth room. And right by that time, our team was beginning to mumble something about them working 18 hours a day. Doesn't matter. No, they're fantastic people. And you can see that how it looks, this destruction within the rooms. We dug just a small sample of these other rooms. So this is the room we dug in 2013. This is 1, 2, and 3 that we discovered this summer. And you can see these ones as they are partially excavated. You see that this guy, we actually excavated more than a sample, just to show that it all had this drain inside. This drain, by the way, was also sampled and found to contain wine, which is not shocking, okay, because it was a drain with wine. Good. Results. Not published yet, but really interesting. The 2013 finds were already published in +1. But we can see the map. This is, by the way, I think the largest sample of organic residue analysis conducted in a Bronze Age structure in the world, I think. And the reason we have done it put so much energy, because it was the first case in which you have in a palace, you have a storeroom, so you know what there is. And it was actually worth it. If to insist it will be done on every single room. This is a corridor. The corridor have wine. Then it's the big room that was excavated in 2013. All of it, all the red ones are wine with resin. There are a couple of ones that are in green. Green means avocado, okay? So it's contamination. It's good. It means that actually we can detect contaminations. But interesting bit is this room and this room. The black ones are saying no results. Basically means that the jars were either empty or really well washed, while the yellow ones, meaning they were found only with resin. So what we have here are empty jars and jars with resin in these two rooms, and here And here you have resonated wine. So what we think, and it's a working hypothesis, is that they were preparing the ingredients here, then bringing only wine from a different place, mixing it, and here were the 40 jars of wine ready to be consumed when the palace collapsed. Right? What a loss of good wine. Capacity estimate, 4,000 plus liter for prepared wine, and additional 4,000 to 8,000 liter for empty jars and wine in preparation. Of course, we don't know how big even this room is. Maybe it's like twice this size. Why would people need at least 4,000 liters of wine for immediate consumption? Okay, right. That is an obvious question. Sorry, dumb question. Why would they need so much wine in a Canaanite? Why didn't we find anything else but wine in the storerooms? Okay, we did a series of tests trying to find out where the wine came from. All the storage jars in the palace and all the pottery from the palace is actually local. That is, to be very, very clear, most of it comes from the immediate 1 kilometer from Kabri. The rest is coming from something like 5 kilometers from Kabri. So, all the wine jars and indeed all the pottery in the palace is local. The other thing we had actually understood, and actually the penny dropped immediately after we found all the wine storage jars, wine cellars, is actually all the halls in the palace are actually used for banqueting, because in each one of them there were animal bones, burnt seeds, and others that are typical of eating and cooking activities. In this large hall, of course in hall 611 when they found a large storage jar of amphoras in the outer star structure, etc. So basically, what we begin to think, and this is the unhappy family, is that a lot of the production of the palace and the palatial economy was actually aimed at financing state feasts. This is not a strange concept as one may think. Dimitri Nakasis was calculating the Pylos Mycenaean economy from the linear B tablets, not from actual finds, and found that most of the products that were brought to the palace as taxes were not used in order to pay salaries to the workers of the palatial sector, but rather to be consumed in large state feasts. So perhaps we have something similar, that is, the palace was actually a large banqueting hall, or at least partially a large banqueting hall, in which alliances were forged between the rulers and different sectors of the society within the polity of Kabri and outside it. That some of the palaces, some of the banqueting was done in a more private autostat structure, perhaps few people. Some in hall 611, perhaps several dozens of people, and some, of course, in the main courtyard in which hundreds of people could have gathered. We also had pieces of wild cattle, aurochs, large specimen weighing something like half a ton, a lot of meat for these feasts. So, almost to recap, the rise of rulerships at Kabri and 250 years of palatial structure occurred in the limited area of a Mediterranean microregion, without literate administration or the use of sealings, very un-Mesopotamian of them, with minimal craft civilization, but with a large-scale storage dedicated to wine. Without the use of iconography of rulership, but with active attempt to incorporate multiple Aegean-style paintings on walls and floors. Is this a state or is this an estate? Textile production from the palace shows that, and you can see the loom weights, shows that actually these are identical both in number and in size to those used in private houses of the Middle Bronze Age. It's a large house. Zooarchaeology shows how different it is from the economy of Chatzor. In Chatzor, for example, it's exactly the same time. 88% is sheep. Only 21% is goats, basically meaning that the Chatzor economy is geared towards textile production. This is not shocking because in the few texts from Chatzor, actually there are references to massive production of textiles connected with Mesopotamian trade networks. But look what happened in Kabri. Most of it is goats that are more fit to the mountainous Mediterranean region. And this is more of a ratio that you expect of a private household than of a specialized economy. Again, you see the same thing that we spoke about it but just see that how local is Kabri also in the wild species used. Aurochses, ibis, and heron were hunted in the marshes south of Kabri. Some Mediterranean fish, pigs and cattle raised in the immediate vicinity. Let us end with what smart people were saying about the various types of rulership. Before that, let us recap the saying, minimal specialization in animal husbandry. The palace seems to be a large household. Highly localized pottery production. Is the palace controlling production? Right. Why there's no imports of pottery from Chatzor, from other places? There is a bit of imported pottery from Cyprus, but not from Chatzor. Large-scale wine storage aimed at local consumption, we said it before. And it's really interesting that the palace is an evolving entity, becoming more and more power with time, evolving over a long period of time and showing actually surprising resilience. That is also interesting, and connection with the Aegean. I would not say with certainty what type of rulership do we have. Is it a pristine system of patrimonial kingship, as Shlon have argued that existing for vast areas of the Levant? It's certainly outside what Schwartz called the Amorite global village of the early 2nd millennium BC. It's not connected to Mesopotamian and Syrian trade networks. And I think the most intriguing bit is aspect of corporate rulership. That is, there may not have been a single person in the top of the pyramid, or at least one we can identify. Do we have corporate rulership as described by Blanton or by Idris and for Minoan Crete? Or, and this is not mutually exclusive, do we have oikos, that is a large household economy on a palatial scale, however, without a palatial sector? Thank you very much.